Wall Street landlords are abandoning the US housing market. They've stopped buying and very soon they're going to start selling. With Fortune reporting that Wall Street is running away from the US housing market. With Wall Street buyers like Blackstone, Opendoor, and Invitation Homes purchasing 90% fewer homes at the start of 2023 compared to 2022. Which is of course great news for you as a regular home buyer or a small investor out there. It means you're not going to have as much competition from these big Wall Street players, especially in certain housing markets throughout the South. Data from Redfin shows that in 2022, the biggest markets for investor home purchases were cities like Jacksonville, Atlanta, Phoenix, where in certain zip codes like in Wynwood and Miami, the investors bought 65% of the houses. So I'm expecting home prices to go down by a lot more in these markets and zip codes in the South because there's a vicious combination of three factors that is causing these Wall Street buyers to run scared. Number one, skyrocketing evictions are leading to higher vacancy rates in empty apartments and homes. Number two, rent growth is declining substantially and going negative in many cities. But perhaps most importantly, number three, higher interest and mortgage rates are making it impossible for these investors to turn a profit. As you can see very clearly on this graph, which tracks the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, the orange line, compared to the cap rate or investor profit for these Wall Street landlords, the green line. And what do you notice, folks? The 30-year fixed mortgage rate now being 6.4%. That's roughly the cost of capital that these investors have to pay to their banks. That's higher than the 4.6% cap rate or return they get from buying a property and renting it out. And one of the Wall Street buyers that has cut back purchases the most is Invitation Homes. They're actually the largest single family home owner in America. They own over 85,000 houses. But you can see from this Fortune article that after the mortgage rate shock, their number of acquisitions, the green bars, has now plummeted to the lowest levels in years, while their dispositions have actually gone up. So Invitation Homes is actually selling more homes right now than they're buying. But I know what some of you are thinking at this point in the video. You're like, Nick, well, that sounds great that investors are buying fewer homes, but why isn't that translating to home prices going down faster in my city? And in fact, the housing market in America has had a little rally over the last month or two. According to Zillow, home prices went up in March with inventory levels still very, very low. And folks, the problem has everything to do with stubborn sellers, regular homeowners, the regular family and couple that owns a home. They don't want to list their home. And if they do list their home, they're listing it way too high right now. For instance, take this listing south of Nashville in Brentwood, Tennessee. It's currently listed for $850,000 when the Zillow home value estimate of this house was $693,000. So literally this seller listed 20% above market value. And what's crazy about that seller that I just showed you is that they're listing 20% high in a neighborhood where inventory is just exploding. That zip code 37207 seeing a 286% increase in homes for sale year over year. So folks, that's a joke. I mean, that listing's a joke. And so many of the listings in today's housing market are a joke. And these stubborn sellers are going to be very, very sorry that they got greedy in the spring of 2023 when they listed their houses. Because in the summer and fall, there is going to be a brutal series of price cuts that these sellers are going to have to go through. And many of their houses are just going to be sitting left on the market for months and months and months, and many will not sell. Because let's just zoom back out and talk about these Wall Street investors some more. They're out on the housing market, folks. They're out on the housing market because of the higher interest rates, but they're also out because there's now big problems occurring in the rental market in America. This is a subject that is not getting very much attention in the mainstream real estate media, but it should be, because we are now seeing declining rents. Rents are now going negative in many cities, with data from Apartment List showing that 40 of the 100 largest US cities now have negative year-over-year rent growth through April 2023. In particular, markets like Jacksonville, Memphis, Austin, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and Seattle now officially have rents on the decline, with the rent declines being biggest in Nevada, Northern California, and Arizona, around minus 5% year over year. Now look, folks, minus 5% on rents doesn't mean rents are now affordable. Rents went up a lot more than 5%, but the fact that they are going down at all creates huge problems for investors. It's why investors aren't buying as many homes. And it signals that there are deflationary forces in the economy right now that are going to lead to lower home prices over the long run, because home prices are ultimately a function of rents. If you look at the historical price to rent ratio in the US housing market, what do you notice? It was fairly consistent, the price to rent ratio from 1970 all the way to the first bubble. Then it boomed, then it crashed, crashed, then it boomed again, and now it's going to crash again. And one reason rents are going down is because there's been a big surge in evictions across America right now. When you look at the data, it's shocking. Lots of landlords are doing mass evictions right now. With data from Eviction Lab now showing that there's been 2.2 million evictions since the pandemic started, with those evictions accelerating substantially in markets like Austin, Columbus, Ohio, Fort Worth, Texas, Jacksonville, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada, Miami, Minneapolis, Nashville, Phoenix, Pittsburgh, and Tampa. And this was ultimately not a surprise, everyone. I've been predicting this surge in evictions in America over the last year because, quite simply, the rents just went up way too much during the pandemic compared to how much people's incomes went up. And the result is renters can't afford it anymore. And after all those moratoriums expired and all that government renter assistance expired, tenants were just left paying 20, 30, even 40% more for their rent when their wages were only up 5 to 10%. And the simple math on that is that there's going to be way more evictions. And a market like Las Vegas is really, really bad. Basically, for the last year, the eviction rates have been about 60% above the pre-pandemic norm. Definitely a market where mass evictions are occurring. And what these evictions are doing to a rental market like Vegas is just causing way more empty apartments. With the rental vacancy rate in Vegas surging from 2.5% in August 2021 all the way to 8.4% in April 2023, an all-time high in apartment lists data set. Another market with surging empty and vacant apartments is Phoenix, where the vacancy rate is now up to 7.4%. And I think Los Angeles is probably the next market to see a surge in vacancy rate. You can see the vacancy rate's gone up from 3.5 to 5.4, which is now close to the long-term average. However, Los Angeles just repealed their 3-year-long eviction moratorium. Get ready for a deluge of backlog evictions in LA County. And so no wonder Wall Street buyers are bailing on the housing market, everyone. And I don't think they're going to come back into the housing market until both prices and interest rates drop by a lot more. Because according to the director of single-family residential at Yield Street, a Wall Street buyer, we're pretty much on pause across all home buying strategies. And they're not going to come back into the market until short-term interest rates come down to around 4%, and if home prices go down by about 15% from their peak. That's a valuation that supports the equity return for them. But I know you guys want to know, when is that going to happen? When are we going to see really the shoe drop on home prices and see interest rates go down? And I got to tell you folks, it has everything to do with the unemployment rate in the labor market. Right now, the labor market is still tight, at least by the government reported employment statistics. The BLS just reported that the unemployment rate is 3.4% in America, near a record low. They reported that we added 250,000 jobs in April. And it's really not going to be until that unemployment rate surges that we see the type of forced selling necessary to flood the housing market with new listings and inventory and push home prices down. And make no mistake, that surge in the unemployment rate and surge in inventory is coming on the US housing market. It's just a matter of time. And to really understand this, let me show you some history of the economy and the housing market in California. Using RevenTrap, we can see that in California right now, there's 35,000 homes on the market in for sale inventory. That 34,000 is down substantially from the 60 to 70,000 that existed before the pandemic. So it's that low inventory in California, which is now putting a floor on home prices and even causing prices to go back up in some markets this spring. However, I do not expect inventory in California to stay low. And that's because history shows that when California gets hit by a recession, things get really, really bad. According to data from the BLS, the unemployment rate in California, going back to the mid-70s, it surges in every recession to close to 10%. You can see we had an 11% unemployment rate in 1983, a 10% unemployment rate in 1992 in California, a 12.6% unemployment rate in 2010 during the last crash, a 16% unemployment rate during the pandemic, and today that unemployment rate is only 4.4%, which is why inventory is low. Sellers in California do not feel the pressure to sell because lots of them still have their jobs, lots of them still have money, even though the tech layoffs have started. But we know from the history of California that that's not going to last, and that in this recession, the unemployment rate will likely double. And when it doubles, that's going to lead to an additional 850,000 unemployed people in California. And if only 10% of those newly unemployed people are forced to sell their house, that would lead to 85,000 more homes for sale, which would quadruple the current inventory levels. So folks, don't get deluded into thinking that this low inventory environment is going to last forever. It's not. It's simply a product of 3 to 4 years of excessive government stimulus and money printing during the pandemic that artificially lowered interest rates. Throw on top of that 2 years of foreclosure moratoriums and bans, and you have low inventory in states like California. But as the unemployment rate goes up in this recession, there will be forced selling, there will be more inventory, and there will be big home price declines, which is something that the big Wall Street investors clearly see. It's why they're out of the market. However, the regular homeowner in America doesn't see it. They're remaining stubborn. However, at a certain point in time, they're going to be forced not to be stubborn by a layoff, by a mortgage default, by some type of liquidity need that's going to force them to sell their house. And where are these potential price declines going to be biggest? Well, it's going to be in the most overvalued housing markets. The states in red on this map, which if you go to Reventure app, go to over undervalued percentage, you can see this data. A state like Tennessee, home prices are 33% overvalued compared to their long-term norms. In Florida, they're 31% overvalued. In Texas, they're 28% overvalued. In Idaho, they are still 35% overvalued, even though home prices in Idaho have already come down. And I know some of you have asked me to explain how I come up with this overvalued percentage, so I'm going to do it right now. If you go on Reventure app and switch from overvalued percentage to value to income ratio, this tells you everything you need to know. The ratio of home prices to income in a state like Idaho is now 6.5, but historically over the last 20 years, it's 4.2. So what over undervalued percentage does is says, how much would home prices need to come down to bring value to income ratio down to the long-term average? It would need to be a 34% decline in Idaho. However, if I go back to over undervalued percentage, there are states where home prices are not that overvalued. Illinois would be one of them. Only 11% overvalued in Illinois, only 14% overvalued in New Jersey, only 7% overvalued in Louisiana. These states in blue are not going to see big home price declines in this crash. I would encourage you to go on Reventure app, check them out for yourself. By clicking Metro, you can see what it looks like in your city specifically. So if you're a buyer in one of these cities in blue, you can have more confidence that you're not going to get wiped out on your equity. But if you're a buyer in one of these metros in red, the fundamentals look really, really bad. The incomes aren't there to support the prices or the mortgage payments. And as this recession gets worse and there's more forced selling, there will be bigger price declines. Now, alternatively, instead of prices crashing by 34% in a state like Tennessee, we could see income and wages go up. And if income and wages go up substantially, that would improve affordability. However, we're already starting to see wage growth decelerate significantly. And with the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates and taking money out of the system, I don't think the American worker is going to do too well with that in terms of growing their wages, which makes home price declines the easiest and the fastest way to restore affordability to the U.S. housing market. And if you guys want to access this data for yourself, you can. Go to www.reventure.app. You can look up how overvalued home prices are in your state, county, and metro for free.